Hello and welcome to the vlog. The night at Hazelhurst Lock passed peacefully and I didn't even get up to go to the loo once, despite the constant whoosh of water over the nearby weir. At my age that's good going. Too much information, perhaps. The froth made the flow of the water much more apparent, so no wonder I'd been making good progress in recent days. And today my end point was in sight. About 7 or 8 miles from here is Newark-on-Trent, and my plan for today is just to go through the other side and get to Cromwell Lock. And at Cromwell Lock the Trent turns from being non-tidal to tidal. I do not intend on this journey to go through Cromwell Lock and onto the tidal section, but I will stop at Cromwell Lock probably for a couple of days. With the engine running gently, I eased away from the lock mooring, leaving the stairway to heaven behind, and headed through the Rorschach water, seeing creatures of terror and swirling chasms of hell somewhat alarmingly. Such nonsense was quickly dispatched as the water lost its bubbly topping, and a beautiful day's cruising began to take shape. I've never seen so many fishing people as I did along the Trent. Every few yards there was another one tucked away in the undergrowth. I was so lucky with this weather. Mid-October I think it was. The cows were not in attack mode this time round. The tiny village of Fiskerton loomed on the horizon. There's been a population here since at least as far back as the Doomsday Book in 1086. Wikipedia says the town name derives from the Norse fiskari, meaning fisherman. No fishing boats here today, but there is a small visitor mooring in amongst the private ones here, and there's a popular pub. You'd think all this vast metalwork was somewhere to tie up to, but it seems it's more about flood protection for the village, with only the pontoons just past being somewhere to stop. Very expensive houses line the bank here. This one was for sale as I went by. You'll need a fat wallet though. Suddenly, there was a rash of other moving craft to wave at and admire, starting with this tiny two-person inflatable dinghy, the couple in it having a whale of a time. This was closely followed by a big pointy white thing, entirely typical of the craft you get on the wider rivers. On the bend at Gorburn there's a tiny bit of visitor mooring which this wide beam was making good use of. But the space behind was firmly in the sight, so another much fendered cruiser. This was fine, I wasn't intending to stop here anyway. More boat spotting around the corner as this fabulous Dutch barge approached and came past. Then you go past a power station, Staythorpe Power Station. It runs on natural gas apparently and is relatively new, having been in operation for only a decade. I was very curious to know if the brick arches where the river seems to go under it mean that the river water is used for cooling, but it doesn't mention that on their website. It crossed my mind that the authorities can be paranoid about people filming power stations as potential terrorist targets. I wondered if at any moment they'd send something out to scoop up my narrowboat, like that tanker eating the submarines in James Bond. Behind that bush is a sign about a genuinely alarming weir up ahead. Pity I can't read it. Here is that weir. Looks normal enough, doesn't it? With big orange buoys preventing boats from going over it. But this one is a little different. The row of buoys comes to an abrupt halt, and then the weir is just open to the river, where, were your engine to fail, the current could drag you inexorably across the event horizon to a new universe, or at least in the end to the other side of Newark. Thankfully my engine performed flawlessly, and suddenly, with the bulk of the water having gone over the rocks, the river narrows into a bit that's much more like a canal, and it's this that takes you into the town. The busy A46 is the first clue you're nearing a major population centre. And then, just when you think you're there, there's a bit more countryside. The speed limit here has gone back to 4 miles an hour, which I was certainly doing. At the edge of Newark is a marina filled with expensive plastic boats, floating gin palaces, which I confess I one day aspire to. It looks like they're expanding the moorings here. Lots of building work and the glimpse of new pontoons.
I should be coming up fairly soon to Newark Town Lock.
And indeed it would be just beyond that bridge in the distance. Once warehouses, unloading onto and from boats on the river, these are now offices. Approaching the lock, the lights were at red, and as I was to discover, they were going to stay like that for quite a while.
I've just spotted there's another boat coming in the lock from the other side, so I'm clearly going to have to wait a little while.
Not one, but two in fact. Here's the first. Soon enough I was in, and the plague of modern-day health and safety, the automated voice alert, looped incessantly as the gates closed. Newark Castle has stood on the bank of the river for 900 years, although these are just the remaining walls, with the bulk of it having been destroyed in 1646 at the end of the English Civil War. Trent Bridge is next to the castle, a rather more modern construction, being only just under 200 years old. Coming the other way was another Dutch barge, and moored on the right is the Castle Barge, a floating pub converted from a grain barge. Barge is the word of the day. There's plenty of mooring here, though I recall Jono of Journey with Jono having a nightmare here as drunken folk ran along his roof one night causing havoc. Those pontoon visitor moorings are probably the best option if you can get a space. And then gently you start to wend your way out of town, under this bridge, and past a marina. Then another pedestrian bridge. And back under the A46 again. There's a lock here, which takes you back onto the wider River Trent, which we bypassed earlier. I'd been told by the prior lockkeeper that he'd let this one know I was coming. What I'd misheard was that another boat was already there and waiting, and here's me dawdling through the town looking at the sights. Cloth ears, I seem to recall my grandmother calling me on occasion. Luckily the other boaters were extremely pleasant and patient, having a day out on this fantastic classic canal cruiser. Below the lock you rejoin the main flow of the Trent, coming in there from the left. There'd be just 6 kilometres, or about an hour's cruising, until I reached Cromwell Lock. It was still an utterly glorious day. Switch off the news, turn off the outside world, and it's a pretty marvellous place to be. That's St Wilfrid's Church at North Muscombe, thought to date from around 1100 and still in use today. Three cheers for a heron! At last! They have been tricky to spot on the wide river. As the sat-nav would say, in 200 yards you have reached your destination. I decided to turn around and face upstream on the mooring, in what was, if I say so myself, quite a nice bit of manoeuvring.
Wow, what an absolutely spectacular place to finish up this cruise. It's beautiful, it's quiet, it's a shame it's only 48-hour mooring.
Good moorings though, with electricity if you have a prepaid card, and a water tap which I made use of. The pontoons float regardless of river height, held by these metal posts, so you don't need to worry about retying your ropes. And it's clearly a popular spot for summer boating, with barbecue pits on the bank, and wooden tables to sit and eat your cremated food at. Plus there's all the usual boater conveniences. I'd like a permanent mooring here, I think. Just before I end, I'll show you the lock. It's very large, with a long entrance channel. This is the main lock chamber. And on the other side, the tidal River Trent. I confess it looks much the same to me as the non-tidal side, but you do need to check the tide times if you go this way. Unusually, there's a middle set of lock gates here, so the lock is actually two huge chambers, which can either be used as one massive or one colossal lock, depending on whether you just fill the first half or both halves. Thank you for watching my cruising videos this year. As usual, I'm not stopping making videos over winter, but I won't be out cruising, so other topics will be covered. I'll leave you with this image of the mooring that I posted on my Instagram. Cheerio!